What's up guys, this is Arma Crossover. I'm back with a new episode of What If Naruto Was Spider-Man with the Power of Speed Force Part 1. And if you're enjoying this video, give this video a like and review my channel and like my content, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more crossover fictions. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 1, Parker. As he lay face down on his desk, deeply sleeping, a garbled voice could be heard through his dreams. Parker. The voice yelled again, this time more louder and interrupting the high schooler's sleep. Naruto Parker, the youthful genius of Osborne Academy, awoke to find himself in his science class after falling asleep again. A few students giggled, while others stared at the boy as he scratched his brow and reapplied his glasses. Unbeknownst to everyone in the room, he was destined to be the hero who saved the world one day, but that day was still several years away and the youngster still had a lot to learn. Once his vision had cleared and his spectacles had been adjusted, the young guy stared back at his peers, emotionless. His one-armed teacher stood behind his desk, one hand on his hip, and asked the young guy a question. This is the third time this week. It amazes me that you were able to maintain an A in this class. Please answer the following question for me. Why is the sky blue? This should be a breeze. The young man sighed and opened his mouth to address the question, only to be cut off by the voice of another student. It's because of the reflection of the ocean, said Flash Thompson, the big blonde jerk who had been making Naruto's life a living misery since elementary school. Flash despised Naruto because, despite appearing to make no effort, he constantly managed to outdo him. Naruto would always beat Flash in sports and academics as a child. He even managed to catch the eye of Cindy Moon, the most gorgeous girl in school. These facts enraged the blonde bully, prompting him to desire to repay the favor and outdo Naruto whenever possible. He would, however, invariably fail and then resort to violence. Many of the students in the classroom chuckled at Flash's response, knowing it was entirely incorrect. The teacher couldn't stop laughing as well. Naruto Parker and Flash Thompson were the only ones who weren't laughing. Naruto inhaled before responding directly to the one-armed teacher. Because blue has the shortest wavelength, it collides with things in the atmosphere, such as nitrogen, which makes up the majority of it. That explains why it's blue. His elbow was resting on his desk as he spoke casually, irritating the blonde bully to the point of turning crimson.
Great job, Parker. The teacher praised him while grinning at his slacker star student. Next time, raise your hand if you aren't called on, Mr. Thompson, okay. After the fact, the class proceeded to snicker and giggle at the Flash inaccurate guess. Flash returned Naruto's gaze and tightened his fist, saying, "You're dead." Naruto returned his stare with an indifferent expression, as was his wont.
When the bell rang, the eager kids jumped out of their chairs. Because they were watching the clock, their suitcases were already packed. While everyone else was departing, Naruto began packing, remaining with his empty notebook and pencil on his desk. He began leaving the classroom after hurriedly shoving everything into his bag. Naruto could tell his teacher was about to talk since he was staring at him.
He tried to avoid his teacher's stare, but it didn't stop him from speaking. Naruto, may I speak with you for a moment? Naruto bowed and approached the teacher's desk, knowing he had no choice. You have a lot of potential, Parker. You sleep in my class virtually every day, your notebook is always empty, and yet you get a higher mark than any kid I have ever had.
Naruto wrinkled his brows in irritation. He'd had similar conversation with several teachers before that day, and he was sick of it. Naruto cut him off before his teacher could accuse him of cheating. If this is about cheating, you aren't the first teacher to accuse me of cheating here. I can take my exams at your desk if you want. The teacher gave Naruto a concerned glance. Oh, no, that's not why I wanted to speak with you. I'd like to invite you to an after-school activity. I mentioned you to Osborne, and he'd love to have you on board. It could even lead to you receiving a scholarship. The expression on Naruto's face indicated that he wasn't interested. Dr. Connors proceeded despite the indifferent stare. I know how much you hate school, so I see why you wouldn't want to come back here, but think about how much easier things could be on your mother. Naruto was raised by his single mother after his father died of an incurable sickness when he was 7 years old. His mother, who worked as a photographer and reporter for the Daily Bugle, frequently worked double shifts just to make ends meet and to pay for his private school tuition.
Naruto wanted to work so he could help her, but she wouldn't let him. She wanted him to focus on his schooling, even though he knew he wouldn't need to study much to keep his straight A's. That was his mother's biggest issue. She never sought anyone's help, especially after his father died. Finally, Naruto chose to attend the after-school program, despite the fact that it meant he'd have to stay at school after hours. Okay, Dr. Connors, I'll be present, thanks. Without saying anything further, Naruto exited the classroom and began making his way to his locker. Naruto entered his locker and began exchanging notebooks and textbooks, grabbing the mathematics textbook for his next class. Naruto closed his locker after he was all packed and ready to travel, only to be met by Flash Thompson and his lackeys. So Parker, you thought that shit you pulled earlier was funny, huh, smart ass? Flash stood in front of Naruto, expanding his chest in an attempt to appear scary but failing miserably. Despite his enormous size from boxing, his young freckled face and blonde comb-over did not frighten Naruto in the least. All I did was correctly answer the question. You're the idiot who got it wrong. Naruto spoke simply and lazily, instantly pissing off Flash. Flash snatched Naruto's shirt and looked him in the eyes. Naruto gazed blankly at him, showing no fear, which irritated Flash even more and prompted him to knee the child in the stomach. Naruto was knocked to the ground and then raised back up by Flash. He repeatedly kneed him in the stomach until Naruto could no longer stand on his own 2 feet. Flash and his henchmen kicked Naruto on the ground until Dr. Connors ran out of the classroom. Hey, Flash, put a stop to it. Dr. Connors dashed over to them. Before sprinting away, the boys each got one last kick in. Oh no, Flash made a mocking remark. Run, everybody, Kurt the cripple. After disrespecting the teacher, the boys raced away smiling and high-fiving each other. Are you alright, Parker? Dr. Connors attempted to help Naruto up with his lone hand, but Naruto ignored him and stood on his own. You have to speak up for yourself, Naruto. You can't just stand there and let them bully you. Before replying, Naruto looked up at Dr. Connors, wiped some blood from his face, and adjusted his now crooked glasses.
You know I'm not going to do that, Dr. Connors. He wants me to fight back so that I can be expelled from school.
I've tried talking to the dean, but he's uninterested. Flash's family is far too wealthy for any of this to matter. If he was expelled, they would simply sue the school. It's not even about money, Osborne's people have plenty of it. The issue is the inconvenience. Why go through all of that for some poor child who is getting smacked around by the blonde quarterback when you can just ignore it?
Even in elementary school, Naruto discovered that retaliating against Flash Thompson was futile. Either no one would get in trouble or only Naruto would, so he quickly understood there was nothing he could do. Even if Naruto wanted to fight, he was too frail to stand up against Flash, and his chances of winning against the boxer were slim. It would only take one nice punch. They were both aware of this. Naruto stood up and walked to the men's restroom without saying anything to his teacher. Naruto looked in the mirror and saw his own reflection. He noticed a thin, tall young man with bright yellow hair. He also noticed a coward with a bloody lip glaring at him. He then established direct eye contact with himself, staring into his own dead, lethargic eyes.
He ran cold water through his hands to remove the blood from his lips. He wiped his mouth clean and returned to the corridor. As he came out of the bathroom, he collided with a girl with short black hair, nearly knocking over her books and water bottle balanced on top. Naruto peered down to see Cindy Moon, his boyhood infatuation and fellow Korean-American student, attempting to rebalance her stack of books. How come I'm so fucking stupid? Naruto's inner voice mocked him for embarrassing himself in front of her yet again. Naruto stretched his hand, catching her water bottle with one hand and supporting her stack of books with the other. Naruto apologized with a breath of relief.
Sorry, I didn't see you. Naruto spoke clearly, prompting Cindy to return her pleased gaze to him. Naruto's entire body language changed the moment he made eye contact with her. He had life in his eyes for once. What, did my incredibly charming looks distract you? Her brows rose playfully as she responded, almost instantly throwing Naruto off. No, I'm not saying you're not charming. I wasn't paying attention. Naruto stroked the back of his head uncomfortably, a habit he developed when he was frightened or anxious. I'm kidding. As she spoke, Cindy giggled into her hand. Unbeknownst to Naruto, she thought he was cute when she teased him, though she preferred to keep that information to herself. You're so funny when you get like that, Naruto. When she spotted Naruto's injured lip, her smile turned troubled. She grabbed Naruto by the cheek, making his face feel like it was in an oven. Flash did this to you, didn't he? It's nothing. Naruto averted his gaze from her in discomfort. He hated being weak in front of her, but fighting Flash wasn't worth it. Cindy then pressed her hands against Naruto's face, forcing him to look her in the eyes. It's all right, Naruto. I understand. Because this is our final year, you will never have to deal with him again. Just be patient, Okay. Naruto nodded, surprised that her gentle hands were touching his face in such an intimate manner.
She's really adorable, he reflected to himself. He could feel his flesh heating up again, his flush disguised by his brown complexion. They then walked to their next lesson together. Naruto would occasionally break the slightest of smiles while conversing to her on the way there. Except for a handful of his professors, she was the only one who didn't treat him like garbage in the entire school, and she was the only one who could unlock the emotion that he had hidden deep within himself. He accepted Dr. Connor's offer and went to the after-school program at the conclusion of the school day. Naruto entered the room and noticed Dr. Connors conversing with a man wearing an expensive-looking suit and having red hair. Dr. Connors caught eyes with Naruto and waved his one hand over the man's shoulder.
There he is. As he approached Naruto with the man in the suit, he declared, "My name is Naruto Parker. That student I was telling you about."
"Ah, good day, Naruto. My name is Norman Osborn, and I'm sure you already know who I am." Osborn laughed heartily as he offered his arm to Naruto. Naruto shook his hand, his face expressionless. "There's a seat open right there next to my son, Harry. Please take a seat." Naruto moved up to the seat that Osborn had indicated and sat next to a young man with straight brown hair. The young man appeared to be a playboy. On the surface, he did not appear to belong in that classroom. He looked up and smiled when he spotted Naruto's presence. Naruto was taken aback by Harry's smile. Normally, people are snobbish about him, but the child appeared to be a decent person. In contrast, Harry had heard about Naruto through his father, so he already had a favorable image of him.
"Hey, you're Naruto, correct? My name is Harry, and my father, Norman, and the doctor have both said a lot about you. To impress those two, you must be extremely intelligent." With his hands behind his head, Harry murmured, "I have a feeling my father put you here next to me because he thinks you'll be a good influence on me. He claims I slack off too much and ignore my potential." Harry said this while making air quotes with his fingers. "I wouldn't call myself a positive influence. I slept through Dr. Connor's entire lecture. I'm not sure why he lavishes such praise on me." Naruto murmured this awkwardly while rubbing his head. On his face, the tiniest of grins, almost imperceptible, appeared. He felt strangely at ease around Harry, as if he could envision himself being friends with someone like him. Dr. Connors took the podium in front of the students and began lecturing before they could finish their sentences.
"Good day, everyone. Today we are delighted to be joined by Norman Osborn. He brought us some fresh specimens to examine today. These are radioactive spiders that Oscorp genetically created." He then removed a sheet from a glass container, exposing that it was full with spiders. One of the spiders lunged at the glass at a pace that looked faster than the speed of light as he removed the sheet. The entire class jumped when the bug landed on the glass, creating a loud thump.
"Don't be concerned. This is a unique tempered glass. They're not going to break through." With a giggle, Dr. Connors stated, "Oscorp created these 12 spiders as a test for a future super soldier project. These spiders have superhuman strength and agility, as well as the capacity to create electricity. The electricity also boosts their reaction time to stimuli, implying that their processing speed has enhanced." A young woman in the front row raised her hand. Sir, there's only 11 in there." The students began to panic until Norman Osborn began to calm them down. "Everyone, don't worry. We must have made a mistake when bringing the spiders here. I may need to replace that intern soon," Osborn said humorously. Dr. Connors continued his lesson on spiders as the class chuckled. Naruto, on the verge of falling asleep, looks down at his arm, which is tickling him. A spider with a strange yellow light, like the ones in the container, started moving up Naruto's arm. The spider bit Naruto's arm before he could respond. Naruto shouted in agony and smacked the spider on his arm, instantly killing it. The entire class turned around, staring at the humiliated Naruto Parker. "I'm sorry, I landed on my knee on the table, and it hurt." Naruto hesitantly whispered the words to the class while covering his hand. They all turn around and resume the lecture after his explanation. During the hour-long presentation, students saw the spiders, discussed the science behind them, and took turns talking to Norman Osborn. The show finished after 1 hour. Naruto said his goodbyes to Harry before attempting to flee the classroom, but Dr. Connors stopped him. "So how do you like it?" "It was cool." Naruto responded with a sliver of life in his voice. "I've got to get moving. My mother has asked me to pick up food on my way home." Naruto swiftly and clumsily exited the door and began walking towards the front door. "Please come back next week if you want to join us again, Naruto." Norman appears to like you." As he talked, Dr. Connors waved out the door, a tiny grin on his face, hoping Naruto would return. The young man unlocked his front door with groceries in his hand before staggering inside as if drunk. He could hear a never-ending stream of probing white noise in his head. His vision was clouded, and he stumbled toward the dining room, unable to see anything. The boy strewnly arranged the items on the table before babbling mindlessly to no one in the empty house. "Mom," he grumbled as he scanned the room, which was empty. Naruto shuffled inside his room, assuming she was still at work, before collapsing on his bed. "Naruto, what exactly are you doing?" The small boy was jolted awake by a voice. Naruto looked up to see his mother standing in the doorway, irritated. She had only just arrived home and was already ranting. "How come you're sleeping on my bed in your outside clothes? Get a shower and change."
Naruto turned around and noticed that it was pitch black outside. He'd been sleeping for hours. When he looked down at his garments, he noticed that his outer clothes were still on. Naruto yawned, still dazed. "Is that your bed? I'm in my room right now." Naruto stretched his arms and searched the room, still perplexed as to how he got there. His memory had gone blank after he bought the food.
"It's technically my bed. I paid for it, and it's in my apartment. Get out of bed with those filthy clothes." His mother spoke sarcastically and angrily. "And dinner should be ready when you're finished. I prepared your favorite." Naruto sighed and leaned up against the side of his bed. "I hope she's referring to pot pie." He went to the bathroom, still dizzy, to take a shower and change out of his school clothes. Naruto departed the hot shower after about 15 minutes, dressed, and went to the dining room. He took a seat at the table because his dish was already prepared in his normal spot. His favorite dish was chicken pot pie, which his mother made. Despite his eagerness to devour his plate of food, the child talked clearly.
"Thank you," he said it without much passion, though his countenance did indicate some appreciation. There was no smile, yet his eyes were bright. His mother smiled bittersweetly, knowing that despite his distance, he was partly content on the inside. Naruto's entire demeanor had changed since his father's death. He got despondent and distanced himself from any bonds. This sadness lasted 10 years, but he kept his emotions to himself.
"You're welcome," his mother said as she took a bite from her dish. She said again once she finished her bite. "How was your day?" "Fine. Dr. Connors suggested I join a science club because it would help me get a scholarship. So, I suppose I'll do it." Naruto was scarfing down food as if it might sprout legs and flee if he didn't eat it quickly enough. "That's great, Naruto." She spoke with much excitement, in contrast to his casual manner. She examined his face, noticing the little marks Flash had left on him. "Didn't that boy hurt you again?" "I apologize, Naruto. I understand how difficult it is to go to school there and not be accepted for who you are, but it will all be worth it when you get into a prestigious institution and earn a decent paying career." She stared down at the ground, embarrassed. "I don't want you to go through what I went through. Things have improved, but it has taken a long time for me to be able to provide for us. We were even homeless at one point due of my insignificance."
Naruto's eyes were sad as he stared at his mother. "You mean a lot to me, Mom. This is not your fault. We will no longer struggle when Parker Industries becomes a reality." He spoke as if he was certain of himself. Parker Industries was little more than a shared ambition between him and his father. They had planned to start the firm together once Naruto was old enough, but that couldn't happen now. Regardless, Naruto was going to do it in lieu of his father.
Despite his efforts to comfort her, Naruto's mother began to cry quietly. Naruto, who lacked emotional intelligence and skills, continued to soothe her like a robot. "Mom, it's not your fault. You had to work more harder when Dad died to compensate for his absence. You've done an excellent job parenting me on your own. Don't shed any tears. Please, I can't stand seeing you like this." Her son's straightforward comments got through to her. Perhaps it was the concept that was important to her. "Yeah, you are correct. I apologize." "No need to apologize. Isn't it normal to cry?" "Thank you, Naruto." His mother wiped her tears, relieved by his attempts to console her. His delivery was never perfect, but she knew what he was saying. "Aren't you off the following day? We should pay him a visit after school," Naruto proposed. They hadn't been to his father's grave in years. Naruto had not visited since he was 10 years old, so the wait was much longer. "Of course we should. I'll be right there when you get home." After that, they continued their meal and talked about various topics for a bit. Naruto returned to his room after they were finished. Naruto dropped onto his bed, still disoriented, and promptly fell asleep. Naruto awoke in the morning to discover that everything in his room had turned upside down. He realized he was stuck to the ceiling as his eyes adjusted. He panicked and started to pull his fingers from the ceiling before collapsing onto his bed. What the fuck was that? The child leaned out of his bed, his gaze fixed on his hand. Despite his blank expression, the child was terrified. What? He murmured yet again as he pulled his fingers together, feeling them stick together as if he had dry glue on them. He caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror out of the corner of his eye, detecting some little changes in himself. When he approached the mirror, he found that his body had entirely changed. He transformed from lanky and thin to possessing the body of a Greek deity. Holy crap. As he flexed in the mirror, he continued to admire his new figure. I'm curious if Cindy likes bulky males. As memories of his crush passed through his head, the young guy forgot he used to wear spectacles on his face, as his vision was now as clear as day without the use of glasses. He could hear his mother's voice in the front door open while flexing and posing in the mirror. I'm off to work. See you later, Naruto.
This prompted Naruto to check the time, realizing he was running late for school. The young man quickly dressed and fled out the front door without eating. The child dashed to the bus stop like a track star, arriving in what felt like 1/5 of the typical time. He arrived barely in time to board the bus and ride it to the hellhole known as school.
Half an hour later, he found himself in front of Osborne Academy, the place he dreaded the most. He sighed and began trudging toward his personal hell, grasping both straps of his rucksack. His head began to sound warning bells before he even got to the front door of the building. The sensation was overwhelming. It reminded him of hearing the sound of your alarm from someone else's phone in public. His fight or flight instinct was screaming at him, overwhelming him. Dodge, run, hide, fight, run, fight, run, fight, run, dodge. The young man moved to the side in an instant, narrowly avoiding a football that would have otherwise slammed into the back of his head. The ball was launched with such force that it shattered the glass door at the school's entrance. Naruto Parker remained still. Wait, what was that? He was talking to himself. He didn't move his body, it moved as if his mind and body were separate entities, acting independently. Paarkrrrrr. A familiar bully screamed from behind the young man, leading him to turn his head slowly. Flash and his henchmen started stomping toward the young man, causing his shoulders to drop in disappointment. Man, thought the boy, can I at least attend one class first? The 4 footballers were in front of Naruto before he knew it, hitting their palms with their fists as if they were stereotypes. Parker, why didn't you notice? You understand what this means, don't you? Your mother must foot the bill. A small spark of electricity discharged from Naruto's index finger unnoticed, inflamed by his school bullies. He didn't know where it came from, but he was certain he could knock the bully out with one blow. Harry Osborn put his hand on his shoulder before he could do anything stupid. Don't. He spoke to the youngster in hushed tones. I got this. Flash, leave him alone. You know who my father is, and I'm going to make your life a living hell. Flash lost the battle to the only boy above him in the food chain throughout the entire school after the 2 rich lads stared each other down for a few seconds. Flash scoffed before leading his henchmen away, leaving Naruto and Harry behind. Naruto let out a sigh. Thanks. He started going toward the school, but Harry followed him whether he wanted to or not. Yeah, don't bring it up. I'm glad he bought it. My father doesn't care what happens in here. As he strolled alongside Naruto, Harry smiled slyly, causing the young prodigy to exhale with delight. Naruto came to a halt, staring at Harry with a puzzled expression. So you lied just for my sake? Why? Naruto was perplexed by the gesture. They'd only known each other for a day, but Harry was already playing buddy with him. It nearly seemed suspicious. I don't know, I just see you getting pushed around all the time by that guy. I know why you can't do anything about it since I overheard you discussing it with Dr. Connors. There was a brief pause between the two, which was only broken by Harry speaking again. The reason is different, but I understand what it's like to be treated differently because of who you are. I don't have a lot of pals. This piqued Naruto's interest. Thinking that someone else, someone of Harry's status, was going through anything similar made him feel less alienated from the world. He was still afraid of creating a fresh bond with someone. It wasn't enough that he was head over heels in love with Cindy. Regardless, the 2 males walked into school together, having a fairly one-sided conversation about themselves, their interests, and the gorgeous girls at school. Naruto's response would be, or, I see. Following each sentence. He seemed uninterested, but he enjoyed talking to him. The rest of the school day went as planned, and Naruto returned home to an empty apartment. He sighed as he entered before closing the door behind him. The boy entered his room, dropped his suitcase, and approached his bed, his mind blank. He was about to leap onto it when he remembered his mother's words. "Why are you sleeping on my bed with your outside clothes on?" Naruto grumbled and jumped into bed, changing into basketball shorts and a t-shirt. He glanced at the ceiling, reflecting on what had happened that morning. He stared down at his hands, forlorn. He was uninterested in possessing supernatural abilities. He realized that having them would only make his life more difficult. Despite his lack of desire to use his skills for anything at this time, his scientist brain couldn't help but activate. He planned to keep his abilities to himself. He did, however, wish to test his powers. He was aware that he could attach to walls, run quicker, and feel events before they occurred, but he wondered what more he might do. He reflected on the spider that bit him, thinking that his abilities had to be tied to the spider in some way. Do webs just shoot out my $1? Everything down there appears to be normal to me. He stared blankly at the ceiling before turning to look out the window at the brilliant orange New York cityscape. He pictured himself swinging from building to building, firing webs from his hands, and flying through the skies. That's foolish, I say. He attempted to disregard those foolish notions, but his mind was racing at 1,000,000 miles per hour. Is it even possible? What if I just made them myself? Web shooters, they call themselves. No, it'll be useless. But it'll be entertaining. Fuck it, he says. The child leaned up from his bed, looking over at his desk, which was loaded with chemicals and science kits either purchased by his mother or stolen from school. He strolled over to his workstation and sat in the chair, then grabbed a pen and paper and began scribbling down the various chemicals he could use to make his so-called web shooters. Salicylic acid, you say, toluene, methanol, carbon tertacylide as a chemical compound, H-heptane, potassium carbonate, it says, ethyl acetate, it says, hexate, BHA, tetraborate of sodium, all okay, they should work. Now all I have to do is find out the exact percentages. So the young genius began combining the chemicals, experimenting with different ratios and percentages until webs began to form. It had taken a few hours, but he had finally finished. He put his pencil, which he had stuck in the fluid, into the air and began pushing it higher. The nylon tied to the pencil eventually became so stiff that the pencil was yanked back down into the beaker, terrifying the youngster. Okay. Now I just need to figure out how to shoot this stuff. Naruto noticed a water gun on the floor of his room, which sparked an idea. Naruto found some superhero gauntlets he had used for a Halloween costume and modified them, inventing a mechanism inside that functioned similarly to a water gun, but with more force to ensure they could propel the thick webbing. The end result was big and little unintuitive because the trigger for them protruded across his hand, but it worked. He could sling webs throughout his room with the click of a button, utilizing them to leisurely pull stuff to himself. After a certain amount of time, the webs too disintegrated, leaving nothing behind. He was bored again as soon as the web shooters were finished. Naruto sighed, lying backward on his bed, arms extended, gazing at the ceiling. Well, there you have it. What now? Naruto stared blankly at the ceiling, pondering what he may do with his new invention. I could sell it, but they'd probably dismiss it as a child's dumb scientific project. Perhaps I can do some tricks or something, like a YouTube channel, or maybe I could livestream myself swinging around town. No, that's too much work. However, I can make money doing that. Mom said I couldn't get a job, but I don't think you need permission from an adult to get money from streaming. Naruto let out a sigh. Fine, I guess I'll try streaming. She will not accept the money, but perhaps I can simply deliver it to Mr. Ditkovich.
With that thinking, the lad went to a streaming site and made a new account. All that remained was to come up with a name.
Huh? Human spider? Ew, no, perhaps. Spider-Man. No, a hyphen is required. Spider-Man, I like it, but I sound like a superhero now. No, thank you. What about the Phantom Spider? That one appeals to me, it's the Phantom Spider. Because it was growing late, the boy decided to postpone the streaming until the next day. Naruto stowed his web shooters beneath a shirt on the corner of his desk before falling in bed and closed his eyes. The Phantom Spider swung around New York with his phone linked to his chest, dressed entirely in black, including slacks, a turtleneck, boots, a trench coat, and a black mask. He was a natural, spinning and twirling in the air as if web swinging were as simple as walking. Usually, the child stayed in his room all day, playing video games or doing homework. The wind in his face as he swung around the city, on the other hand, was exhilarating. As he had promised himself, the child had started his streaming career, swinging through the city, executing feats and tricks for the enjoyment of his viewers. Thousands of people rushed in to see the phantom spider swing almost immediately after the young man's stream took off. They thought he was some kind of superhero, which was amazing because superheroes were rare at the time. Nobody knew what had happened to the heroes after they went silent seemingly out of nowhere. The fact was that the Avengers had gone off-world, leaving just a few heroes like the Fantastic Four and Ghost Rider to defend Earth. The phantom spider continued to swing in the air, completely unconscious of how many people were watching him. Wanting to observe the progress of his stream, the child stopped at a hot dog stall and grabbed a glizzy before swinging back up to one of New York's many towers. The phantom spider began eating his lunch while reading the discussion while removing only a small portion of his mask. Are you a hero? Are you an Avenger? Are you single? Fight something. How did you get your powers? The boy was being barraged with inquiries, subscriptions, and donations. He was making more money on the first day than he could have dreamed. He wasn't doing this to be a hero, so he made sure to make that apparent. I'm not a hero, guys. I'm just a performer. I'm not capable of fighting anyone. The young man stated clearly to the chat room, sparking another clamor of inquiries and requests. Yes, you can. What's the point of powers if you won't use them? Come on, stop a robbery or something. As hundreds of individuals continued to spam him and tell him what he should do with his powers, the child felt the weight of peer pressure falling on him. The boy immediately ended his stream because he was overwhelmed. I apologize to everyone. I have to leave right now. Thank you for your help and donations. He immediately turned off the stream, exhaling a breath of relief.
It was easy money, but I'll never do it again. He was thinking to himself as he jumped off the building he was sitting on, hot dog in hand, and began swinging back home. Do it, carry it out. Why don't they just hit a couple men and call themselves heroes? I'm sure Oscorp has a few more spiders for them.
The young man continued to think to himself till he arrived at home. After entering through his window, the child looked around the corner and saw that he was once again at home alone. In the empty flat, he moaned, feeling nothing but loneliness. Naruto spent the remainder of the day studying homework and creating new costume designs. His creations included a skin-tight red and blue outfit with a spider emblem on both the front and back. He couldn't help but experience weird sensations as he stared at his own drawing. He was upbeat, he was inspired. Just by staring at the masked man in his drawing, he felt safe. No, the child realized he was using other people's opinions on what he should be doing to influence his own perspective of himself. He didn't want to be a hero, or so he told himself, despite automatically picturing himself as one. He crumpled the sheet of paper with the heroic costume design and tossed it away. After spending the remainder of the day debating what to do with his new abilities, the boy went to bed, still debating what is and isn't his job with his new ability. Naruto went to school as usual the next day. Surprisingly, Naruto, or at least his alter ego, was famous among the high school students. Everyone, even his attacker, was praising this new hero known as the Phantom Spider, though Naruto disagreed with the hero aspect. Naruto returned home after school to find his mother waiting for him, exactly as she had promised. As agreed, the two of them then left to take a cab to Naruto's father's final resting place. Naruto hadn't been to his father's grave since he was a child. Going there was always difficult for him and his mother. They eventually ended up standing at his tomb. Here rests Richard Parker, the gravestone stated. He was a wonderful parent, husband, son, and friend. As his emotions began to overpower him, Naruto looked down at his father's final resting place. When he looked over at his mother, he saw tears streaming down her cheeks as she held flowers in her hand. The flowers were then laid on the tomb by her. Her tears fell and landed on the petals of the flowers as she did this. They stayed silent since none of them knew what to say to the other or to Naruto's father. After about a minute of silence, Naruto's mother addressed him. Did I ever tell you about how your father and I met? She gave a slight smile as she briefly reflected on the past. You've both told me some things, but not everything. No, Naruto made a shaky motion with his head. She hadn't spoken about meeting his father since before his death. Naruto's mother then sat down at the grave and laid her palm on it, a bittersweet and tearful grin on her face. I used to work as a server at this restaurant right after I graduated high school. He worked as a chef. Because he was so tall, his outfit always fit oddly. He couldn't wear the pants since they were too short. He appeared to be a nerd, yet I found something about him endearing. Her hand was still on Richard's grave when she told her son. Because my job was to serve the food that he prepared, we would interact quite frequently. One day, he finally asked me out on a date. We ate at the same restaurant where we worked. Naruto cracked a rare smile as she giggled at the foolish memory. It was a terrible first impression. Really? I thought to myself. Is that the same location we work? He wasn't particularly inventive with such kinds of things back then. I did, however, like my time with him, so I agreed to another, and then another. You get the picture. She smiled softly as she gazed up at Naruto, realizing that her son was smiling back at her. Eventually, we got quite close. We could have become a couple at that moment. All I needed was for him to ask me properly. During my lunch break, he came over with a tray containing a single slice of the lemon pie he regularly made. It was my personal favorite. Even after we stopped working there, I begged him to make it for me all the time. He spelled out, "I want to be your man," on the plate. It was ridiculous, but it was our favorite song at the time. It honestly made me laugh and smile more than I had in my entire life. I answered sure, assuming this was his clumsy way of asking me out. Then, 5 years later, we were married on the same exact day. We had you 2 years later. I didn't know he was so lame back then. As his hand rested on the other side of the grave, Naruto laughed gently. That does seem like something I'd do, though. Naruto briefly considered Cindy and how he would approach her if he ever had the courage to do so. He had numerous opportunities, but he was terrified of girls, particularly Cindy. Naruto's mother raised an eyebrow before inquiring about her son's private life. Do you have any crushes on any of the girls at school? You're around the same age as your father and I were when we met. Naruto, surprised by the question, shook his head and pretended Cindy Moon didn't exist. What? No, I'm not looking for any girls. So, you like boys? That's okay as long as you're content, she inquired of him. She didn't care if that was true, but she thought tormenting him would be amusing. Naruto shook his head once more, almost panicked.
No, I enjoy women. His mother then chuckled at his sudden agitation, leading Naruto to put his hand on his brow in embarrassment. I have one girl. Cindy is her name. As he confessed, he felt the heavy weight of his secret lift from his chest. She's quite nice. She's also quite intelligent. I've liked her since elementary school, but I'm afraid that if I make a move on her, I'll scare her away.
With a nice smile on her face, his mother reached over and placed her hand on his shoulder. Don't be concerned. You'll never know unless you ask. Furthermore, the worst she can say is no, she informed him. Naruto raised his eyes to his mother once more. She could say something worse like, fuck no, or something. He stated clearly, his face as straight as possible. Before telling him anything about his father, his mother smiled and covered her mouth. You know, when I asked your father about it, he thought the same thing. You two are hilarious. Well, I am his son. Naruto spoke quietly. Yeah. You and him are quite similar. You're like a smaller version of him. I'm relieved it's that way. Seeing you every day makes it seem like he's never left. I still miss him and it hurts at times, but at least I have you. This is our son, she informed him while smiling regretfully once more.
Naruto was plainly in sorrow, fighting back tears as he remembered both his father and himself. It sometimes feels like a curse, to me. Naruto spoke solemnly as he clasped both hands around his knee, his gaze fixed on nothing. Every day, when I look in the mirror, I see him. I can't explain it, but it feels like I'm failing someone by not being him. I even feel like I'm letting him down at times.
His mother shook her head before speaking quietly to him while still resting her hand on his shoulder. No way, Naruto. You do not have to be him. You are you. It is not your responsibility to be him. It is your responsibility to carry on your father's name and legacy as yourself. That's exactly what he'd want. You should be pleased to be his son, and to be a Parker. Those were the words Naruto urgently wanted to hear. His entire life, at least after his father died, he felt nothing more than a letdown and a burden. He aspired to fill his father's shoes but was unable to accomplish so. You're correct, Mom. Thank you very much. Naruto spoke softly. His mother smiled and rubbed her son's shoulder as the two sat close to his father's grave. They talked for a while before Naruto's mother got a phone call from her job. They had summoned her for something, which Naruto didn't mind because she had honored her promise in the end. They split the cost of a cab ride home before splitting up. Naruto walked inside and took a shower before continuing with his homework and gaming regimen. It was late at night, and his mother had still not returned home. The young man went to bed, supposing it had been a long day at the office, traffic, or both, unaware of the reality that would shortly arrive. 3 knocks on the front door of his mother's apartment jolted the spider child awake, followed by the sound of a guy calling out his name. Are you Mr. Parker? Are you there, Mr. Parker? This is the New York Police Department. The boy's heart felt as if it were falling from his chest and into the deepest pit of his body. He got out of bed and froze, unwilling to move until the knocking stopped. Knock knock knock. The young man rose from his bed and carefully walked over to the door, as if the knocks had placed him in a trance. His heartbeat was thundering, as if the heart itself was about to break out of his chest. He eventually found himself standing at the front entrance, his hand hanging over the doorknob. Knock knock knock, Mr. Parker? The vigorous knocking jolted the child, washing out his uncertainty. He lowered his hand and grabbed the doorknob, opening it to reveal 3 police officers standing in the corridor. They wore serious expressions. They didn't have good news. Mr. Parker, my name is Officer Sanchez. The dad hesitated, knowing that the next words he spoke would devastate the youngster. He couldn't even look at the adolescent, diverting his gaze before proceeding. Just have a seat, Mr. Parker. The young man and the police officers entered the living room, where Naruto and Officer Sanchez sat on the couch, while the other cops stood around. Naruto's mind was racing with ideas. Something horrible had obviously happened, but the suspense of the unknown was killing him.
Before presenting the terrible revelation to the young kid, the officer removed his hat. I apologize, son. This evening, your mother was discovered dead in a landfill. We've come to ask you some questions about her, okay?
Naruto's was immediately unresponsive, his senses all shut down. The officer talked, but the youngster could only hear his garbled voice in the background of his own screams. The officers stood in front of him, but the youngster couldn't see them because he was too preoccupied with his mother's final moments. The boy wanted to scream but couldn't bring himself to open his mouth. The officers continued to try to grab the broken teen's attention as he stared forward, blankly. The voices were muffled, as if he were underwater, yet one could be heard. Parker. Naruto's body shook as he came out of his slumber. He then turned to the police with dead eyes, leading the officer to nearly cry himself when he saw how quickly the youngster broke. Do you have any information? Do you have any adversaries? Is your mom a journalist? Has she been involved in anything that you are aware of? The officer inquired quietly. I don't. Naruto responded coldly in his simple, quiet voice. The officer paused, knowing that the boy was probably not ready to discuss any of this, but he pushed on regardless. Are you certain? This wasn't your average murder, child. It was something. I said. I'm not sure. Please leave me alone. Though the officers were unaware, Naruto's limbs began to discharge electricity. He was about to snap if they asked him any more questions. Fortunately, the officers realized they had overstayed their welcome and left after his remark. All right, son. I apologize. Here's my phone number in case you need it. We'll leave. Guys, come on. The 3 officers left, leaving the youngster in the living room alone. For half an hour, the child sat in the same location, not moving a single muscle, lost in his thoughts. He had nothing left, no family, and no reason to live. He considered suicide several times, wondering if the thought of abandoning his mother was the actual reason he couldn't bring himself to do it in the past. Finally, he could bring himself to try it. The boy finally moved at 11 p.m., getting up on his feet and slowly strolling towards his mother's room like a lifeless machine. The cops were worthless. He was well aware of this. He realized that if he wanted to find out who did what to his mother, he had to do it himself and follow her steps. I can't die just yet. No, I want the perpetrator to suffer. Then I'll be able to die in peace. The youngster thought to himself, rationalizing his continued existence. Naruto entered her room and went straight to her computer, where he accessed her cloud data. He was aware of the password. It was nothing more than his grandmother's name and a few numbers. Naruto could see various images and data involving something that his mother was looking into while scrolling through the cloud. Project V? As he went through the countless files on her computer, he thought to himself, his mother has been investigating this mystery project for years. It was her big story, her big break, but it was inevitably her demise. The folks in charge of this so-called Project V didn't want anyone finding out about it, so they wiped her after she went too deep into it. The contents of the Project V folder were heinous. There were scores of dead bodies, seemingly depleted of nutrients to the point of being little more than empty husks. Their skin was darkened, and their teeth were sharp like those of wild beasts. Naruto clicked on a video that was one of the contents in the file. The video showed a person strolling through a dark facility, likely his mother, who was looking for information about Project V. Suddenly, what appeared to be a human inside a glass cage began smashing their body against the glass like a psychotic zombie. Their skin was blackened, and they had sharp teeth like the others. The creature then started licking the glass. It had a tongue nearly a foot long. The camera then pans to show an elevator on its way down, leading the camera person to cover behind some boxes from whoever was on their way down. 2 guys emerged from the elevator, one wearing gauntlets around his suit and the other in a suit. The suit's wearer was a humanoid, but his skin was gray like that of a shark. "Looks like the freaks are acting up." In a gravelly voice, the larger, yellow-costumed thug replied. "They must be starving. Herman, you should get involved," the man in the suit enticed with a Russian accent. "How about I throw in your skinny ass instead? Perhaps Fisk will give me your cut." Naruto paused the video when he heard this. Fisk? Fisk, Wilson. The child immediately looked through the folder to find a picture of Wilson Fisk that he had previously neglected. It was taken quickly, but Fisk was seen shaking a man's hand. Only his hand was visible, not the man. He was dressed in a suit and was white. That was the only lead available. Fisk. As his limbs began to flash brightly with yellow electricity, Naruto mumbled. He straightened up and walked out of his mother's room, emotionless. He returned to his room and donned the costume he had previously worn during his stream. He was wearing a black mask and a pair of glass goggles that he had used for science experiments. He was dressed in a black turtleneck and black jeans. He had black Timberland boots on his feet and a black trench coat over his attire. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't see himself staring back at him. It was a different person. The Phantom Spider was created. The Phantom Spider swung aggressively through the metropolis to Fisk Tower in the pouring rain. His thoughts of how he would exact retribution on the man guilty for his mother's death raced through his mind, only to be interrupted by the rumble of thunder and lightning in the sky above. The Phantom Spider had gone absolutely insane. There would be no hesitating. The building with the word, Fisk, emblazoned on it was his destination. The spiteful phantom had seen it before and knew exactly where to find it. He eventually made it to the tower and began climbing it with his sticky hands to the top. Fisk sat at his desk, smoking a cigar and counting money, completely unaware of what was about to happen to him. A lightning strike flared behind Fisk, and he could see the phantom's silhouette stalking him from behind. Fisk spun around to peer through the window but saw nothing. He turned around after a brief investigation of the glass and resumed counting his stacks on the desk. He didn't notice the enraged spirit slithering out of the vent above him.
Another lightning strike flashed, and the power in the building went off at the same time. Before Fisk could react, another lightning bolt illuminated the room, and the identical shadow that had emerged earlier appeared on the ground in front of Fisk, but this time considerably more menacing. When Fisk turned around, he saw the Phantom Spider hovering above his head. He looked over at his desk, grabbed a rifle, and pointed it at the arachnid, but it had vanished.
A woman was murdered today. Why? Who is to blame? The chilly voice of the monster muttered from someplace in the chamber. Fisk clutched his revolver fiercely and directed it at the voice, but it rapidly webbed away from his fingers. Fisk could see the outline of a phantom approaching him from the darkness, yellow energy forming around its arms. The Phantom Spider's whole form appeared in front of him as the shadow continued to move forward. The Phantom Spider spoke, holding out a printed-out replica of the image of the Kingpin shaking hands with a mysterious suited man. "Who is this man that you're shaking hands with in this photo?" A lightning strike flashed behind Fisk as those words left his mouth, and thunder quickly followed. "I know precisely who that is, and I'm not lying to you. So, brat, bug off." The Phantom Spider was enraged by the tubby criminal lord's statements, driving him to jump forward and deliver an electricity-filled punch to the Kingpin's jaw with extraordinary force. Wilson Fisk's jaw would have been taken cleanly from his face if he hadn't been so powerful, at least in comparison to a typical human. The enormous man shot backward, slamming into the bulletproof glass behind him, which cracked slightly due to the force of his body crashing into it. The Phantom Spider webbed the man's wrists and ankles before he could compose himself. The fat man spoke while his limbs were splayed across the glass, unable to move a muscle. "Do what you want, I ain't telling you shit." The Kingpin attempted to spit at the Phantom Spider as it approached slowly, but the child easily avoided it. "You'll tell me." Before subconsciously filling his hands with lightning and smacking the enormous man in the face, the child said. The glass behind him cracked again, and the child continued his questioning. "Who is this guy? Who murdered the woman? Who gave you the order? What exactly is Project V?" The child drew his fist back, charging another blow before launching it full force into the man's face. "ZTT. Crack. I told you I wouldn't tell you. I send them to kill anybody I want, and no one tells me what to do." The Phantom Spider saw right through the man's confident falsehood. "Who did you dispatch? And I'm not stupid at all. I know that man in the image is connected to all of this. Please tell me who he is." The enraged child drew his electric hand back and punched the Kingpin in the face once more. ZTT. Crack. Fisk's men tried to break down his door after hearing the commotion outside, but it was entirely webbed shut. Kill me if I tell you who that man is or what Project V is. I'm dead, and so is my family. So go ahead and do it. Kill me like they killed whoever you came to avenge." Those remarks sent the child off, causing the electricity on his limbs to brighten before launching a flurry of full-power fists at the Kingpin's face. ZTT, crack, ZTT, crack, ZTT, crack. Electricity, melting skin, shattering bones, and agonizing screams could be heard by all, including the guards on the opposite side of the door. With each punch, pieces of the Kingpin's face flew off, staining the glass behind him. He died eventually, and his screaming stopped. This did not deter the boy from continuing his assault. The speed of the boy's blows increased to the point where they were nothing more than a bright yellow blur of energy, cooking the Kingpin's skin like a boiled egg. The boiling egg eventually popped, leaving a big bloodstain on the glass in the Phantom Spider's body. He used his last punch to deliver a hard strike to Fisk's chest, shattering the glass and causing his decapitated body to tumble from the top floor of his tower all the way down to the pavement below him. A faint buzzing sound could be heard by Kingpin's murderer, who was standing at the broken window and looked down at the mess he had made. When he looked over at what was left of a desk, he noticed a phone illuminating the devastation. Before checking the notification on the screen, he webbed the phone and dragged it towards himself. "The job is done, boss." There was also a photo related to the text. The killer attempted to unlock it, but it was locked and requested a Face ID. Naruto gazed at the screen, then at the shambles of Fisk far beneath him. Well, that's not gonna work, he thought to himself as he chose to figure out the password on his own. Let's see, he started trying random popular passwords, but none of them worked. The Kingpin was far too intelligent for that. He discovered a photograph of Fisk and his daughter at what seemed to be a birthday party while rummaging through Fisk's belongings. Naruto saw a date at the bottom of the image and typed it into the phone, which opened. "Sorry, kid." The Phantom Spider mumbled to himself before browsing through Fisk's communications and reading the most recent one. He could see the image this time. It was a photograph of one of Fisk's victims. Naruto's body shook violently as rage and other emotions overwhelmed him. So he sends henchmen to do his dirty work. He kept scrolling through the messages until he came across one concerning his mother, which showed her disfigured dead body inside a black plastic bag. He began shivering again, and tears flowed down his disguised face. He almost broke the phone in his hands, but he knew that if he sought revenge, he'd need it in one piece. He then looked through Fisk's banking app and found a payment that perfectly coincided with his mother's death. "Herman Schultz." The youngster murmured. "This is the real murderer. Can you identify the man in the suit?" He pondered this before combing through the Kingpin's phone in vain. He couldn't find a single lead, except texts sent by Fisk's henchmen. The Phantom Spider's hunt was stopped by the noises of police cars and helicopters, leading him to place the phone in his pocket and depart the area. To avoid having the phone track him home, the Phantom Spider concealed it somewhere only he could reach before returning home. He found that he didn't feel any better after killing Wilson Fisk as he swung back home. He killed one of the men who killed his mother, yet he felt nothing. He wondered if it was because Fisk hadn't pulled the trigger. Regardless, if we were to avenge his mother, the perpetrators had to perish. Only then could he be content. That's what the youngster told himself. Naruto Parker, the boy who had lost everything, stood in the chilly rain, emotionless, staring down at his mother and father's graves. The youngster lingered in the same position for hours after the burial since he was the only one left. His mother's one wish, which she told him long ago, was to be buried next to her husband when she died. Their son, the only one remaining to carry on the Parker name, granted her ultimate wish. It was the bare minimum he could do. The child soon went to his knees as tears streamed down his cheeks, accompanied by the chilly rain. He screamed in agony, not knowing what to do with himself. Ah! Only the youngster and the spirits at rest could hear the boy's frenzied cry echoing through the deserted graveyard. Why? Why, God? The boy attempted to communicate with his maker, but received no response. He wasn't really religious. His family only went to church on holidays like Christmas and Easter. Regardless, he searched for answers in his misery. Why me? What went wrong? He asked audibly and forcefully, pounding the grass with each inquiry. He felt duped. He felt worthless. He felt like a speck on the earth, as insignificant as the worms moving in the earth under him. Before his father died, he prayed every day for the discovery of a treatment for his sickness. The prayer had no effect. When his mother was all he had left, he prayed that she would live a lengthy life and be with him until he reached adulthood. The prayer had no effect. At the time, he pondered if God existed at all. If there actually was a creator, he pondered if he got a joy out of seeing others suffer in this way. criminals, murderers, rapists, they were all part of this world. If there was a god, the boy was perplexed as to why those things existed and were made. His emotions quickly moved to envious wrath, thinking of the millions of people in the world who have never known loss, and yet he was suffering alone in front of his parents' graves. Why did you take everything I had? As the rain fell straight on his brown-skinned face, he screamed into the black, empty sky. What do you want from me? As he stared blankly at his mother and father's graves, the youngster calmed down and spoke calmly. Are you going to take them next? Naruto was thinking about Cindy Moon and his new friend Harry Osborn. He was friendly with Cindy. He had feelings for her. He worried if she would be carried away in the same way. Despite only knowing Harry for a short time, he had grown rather fond of him. If they become closer, he wondered if Harry, like his parents, would be lost. Would growing closer to them be worth the risk of losing them? He reflected to himself. Would being alone be preferable?
The boy sobbed softly until the sound of thunder crackling above him reminded him of the powers he had just earned.
Why did I get these powers? As he peered down at the palm of his right hand, the youngster murmured. Was it to make fun of me? Is this some strange kind of irony? Despite his superhuman strength, the child felt helpless. He didn't consider his abilities to be a gift. He saw them as little more than a curse. What is my purpose? He mumbled something painfully. Why am I so sour? Why do I feel so much anger and pain inside myself, while I am empty? He remembered the moment he killed Fisk and saw his body splatter on the pavement below him. He expected to be satisfied when it happened. He expected to feel vindicated because his mother had been avenged. However, this was not how he felt. He was ashamed of himself. He murdered a man, a father, for no reason. It served no purpose. All he did was perpetuate the pattern and transfer his own sorrow to someone else, the little girl in the image with Fisk. What will happen if I kill Herman? Would I still have no feelings? Is it because Fisk didn't pull the trigger that I'm unhappy? Will I ever be happy? Would killing him merely result in my own anguish being shared with someone else? Is killing Herman also pointless? He demanded explanations yet again, but received none. You're useless. The boy spoke gently, using words that may be construed in a variety of ways. For nearly an hour, the kid cried over his parents in the pouring rain, not moving an inch from his position on his hands and knees. He was at a loss for what to do with himself. Part of him wanted to waste away and die on the spot where his parents had lain, or to climb to the city's tallest structure and let gravity do whatever it wanted with him. After a while, such thoughts faded. With determination in his eyes, the phantom spider rose back up on his feet and took one final long look at his parents' burial place. I will make things right, he said while clenching his fist on his mother's grave. The youngster turned around and went away from his parents' graves with those final words. He pondered if he'd be able to honor his vow as he traveled home alone in the dark. To be continued.
That's it for this podcast. Thanks for listening to this video. I hope you did enjoy the story, and if you did, like, share, and subscribe for more, and thank you all for helping support, and have a great day.